Let's dive right in. Today, we're exploring an absolute marvel of natural engineering. And honestly, it's you. We're looking at how your body acts as this highly advanced biological machine that's just constantly detecting and reacting to its surroundings. I mean, every single second, your body is processing an immense amount of data, right under the radar, just to keep you functioning, safe, and balanced. Think about this for a second. How does your body actually know to pull your hand away from a hot stove or a fire before you even consciously register the pain? It kind of feels like magic, doesn't it? But it's actually the result of some unbelievable processing speeds and emergency protocols built right into your biology. So let's unpack exactly how that happens. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with sensing our environment, map out the nervous system, look at reflex actions, cover the endocrine system, examine our sense organs, and then wrap the whole thing up with homeostasis. Okay, part one, sensing our environment. So the world outside our bodies is, frankly, chaotic. Temperatures drop, lights flash, sounds echo. It's a lot. And to survive, we have to make sense of all that chaos. It really boils down to two fundamental concepts. First, you have the stimulus. A stimulus is just any change in the environment that triggers a response. This could be light, heat, a sound, or even dissolved chemicals you're smelling in the air. Then you have the response. That's what your organism actually does about it. That reaction can be an immediate reflex, like yanking your hand away from something hot, or a delayed, thought-out decision, like walking over to get a glass of water because you feel thirsty. Basically, everything our body does is a reaction to incoming data. To handle all these responses, our bodies rely on two main communication lines. Think of the nervous system as your high-speed broadband network. It acts incredibly fast, carrying these short-lived electrical signals for quick actions, like blinking or withdrawing from pain. On the flip side, the endocrine system is a bit more like a slow-release chemical postal service. It uses hormones traveling in the bloodstream for slower but much longer-lasting changes. We're talking things like growth, metabolism, and stress responses. Which brings us to section 2, the nervous system network. Let's see how this builds into something more complex by zooming in on that high-speed broadband network. We'll start with the central nervous system, or CNS. Made up of the brain and the spinal cord, you can really think of the CNS as the central processing unit of a computer. It is the absolute command center of your body. It receives sensory information, interprets incoming signals, stores data, and coordinates your responses. Whether you're reading a book, balancing on one foot, or just deciding to move, your CNS is running the show. And then, branching out from this is the peripheral nervous system, essentially the massive bundle of cables carrying signals to and from the CNS. But what are those cables actually made of? Let's look at the basic unit, the neuron. This beautifully branched structure is the literal wiring of your body. The branches, which are called dendrites, receive signals from neighboring neurons. The cell body processes that information, and if the signal is strong enough, it fires an electrical charge, an action potential, straight down that long fiber called the axon. And here's the truly mind-blowing part. That electrical charge travels down the axon at speeds up to 120 meters per second. To put that in perspective, that's nearly 270 miles per hour. Moving on to section 3, emergency override, reflex actions. Now, because those signals travel so incredibly fast, our body can pull off some amazing feat when we're in danger. A reflex is a rapid, automatic response that happens without you even thinking about it. Here is the 5-step short circuit, known as the reflex arc, that makes it all possible. Step 1, a receptor detects a harmful stimulus, like tissue damage. Step 2, a sensory neuron shoots that signal toward the central nervous system. Step 3, and this is absolutely crucial, the signal reaches the spinal cord and synapses directly to a motor neuron. It literally bypasses the brain entirely. Step 4, the motor neuron carries the command back out. And step 5, the effector muscle contracts to pull you away. This entire life-saving sequence, it can happen in just 50 milliseconds. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact moment we were talking about earlier. You touch a hot stove, the sensory neurons fire, the spinal cord immediately bounces that signal back down the motor neurons, and you pull your hand back. Your brain only gets the memo that you're in pain after your hand is already safe. It's a complete evolutionary masterpiece of an emergency override. All right, section 4, long-term control, the endocrine system. So life isn't just about split-second emergencies, right? For sustained long-term regulation instead of electrical impulses, the endocrine system uses chemical messengers called hormones, which are secreted directly into the bloodstream by various glands. We've got the pituitary gland, often called the master gland because it controls water balance, growth, and even bosses other glands around. We have the thyroid, which regulates metabolism, the adrenal glands pumping out adrenaline and cortisol for your stress responses, and the pancreas secreting insulin and glucagon to keep our blood sugar perfectly stable. What's super fascinating here is the lock and key mechanism. See, hormones circulate everywhere in your blood, but they only actually affect target cells that have the specific receptor shape to match them. It's incredibly precise. Section 5. Input devices, sense organs. How do our internal systems even know what's going on in the first place? Well, our sense organs are specialized structures that detect environmental stimuli and convert them into nerve signals. And we have different receptors for different jobs. Mechanoreceptors in your skin and ears detect pressure, vibration, and sound waves. Chemoreceptors in your nose and tongue bind to chemical molecules so you can actually smell and taste. And photoreceptors in your eyes detect light energy. They're all just constantly feeding raw data right to your brain. Taking a closer look at just one of these, the eye, it truly is a marvel of natural engineering. Light enters through the clear cornea, passes through the lens, and then gets focused directly onto the retina at the very back. Here, specialized photoreceptors go to work. The rod cells are highly sensitive to dim light, they give us our black and white vision, while the cone cells handle bright light and color vision. They convert that light into electrical signals, sending it straight down the optic nerve for the brain's visual cortex to construct the image you're seeing right now. Section 6. Achieving balance through homeostasis. Okay, so we've got sensors taking in data, a high-speed nervous system reacting instantly, and a slower endocrine system regulating over time. But what's the ultimate goal of all this interconnected machinery? Well, it's homeostasis. That's the body's ability to maintain incredibly stable internal conditions, totally regardless of what's happening outside. This delicate internal balance is absolutely critical because our cells can only survive within very narrow margins. For instance, your body fights constantly to keep your core temperature right at about 37 degrees Celsius. It works to keep your blood pH at exactly 7.4. Why? Because if it shifts too far, your cellular enzymes literally just stop working. A really great example of homeostasis in action is thermoregulation. Your hypothalamus essentially acts as your internal thermostat. When you get too hot, it triggers sweating to cool you down via evaporation, and vasodilation, which just widens your blood vessels to release heat. But if you get too cold, the hypothalamus coordinates the exact opposite responses. It triggers shivering to generate heat, vasoconstriction to keep that warm blood red in your core, and piloerection, which is really just the fancy scientific term for goosebumps to trap a layer of warm air against your skin. All of this operates on a really neat principle called the negative feedback loop. It's a continuous cycle. A stimulus causes a change, your receptors detect it, your control center processes it, and an effector produces a response. But the key to the negative feedback loop is that the response directly counteracts the initial stimulus. If your temperature goes up, the response cools you down until you're right back at that perfect set point. And once that balance is restored, the response just naturally shuts off. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. But I want to leave you with this final thought. Right now, as you sit here listening to this, millions of microscopic adjustments, electrical impulses, and chemical messengers are firing inside you just to keep you alive and perfectly balanced. You are quite literally carrying around a masterful biological command center. So the next time you blink, break a sweat, or pull your hand away from something sharp, I hope you take a second to just marvel at the incredible science happening right inside of you. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the human body.